stories. Share yours.
Do you hear it? The quiet part said out loud. Voices saying, maybe next time, and not right now. Another setback, timeout, false start. Doubt pushing you to shift, shrink, fold, hide. All while knowing inside you, there's more. The momentum in you is you. Hits you, builds you. The field is just a field until we step on it. Under these lights, walk-ons are welcome. Between unexpected and undeniable. Beyond the almost and the could-have-beens. Our tribe, our people. Here is a home with no penalty for being you. Do you feel it? The landscape has changed. Now watch the world. This is for the love of the game. For everyone. For you.
Hello and welcome to CBS Sports HQ. I'm Hakeem Dermish. It is a huge night in America. We've got wall-to-wall coverage of the first college football rankings of 2024. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, it's a new era of college football. The start of a 12-team playoff, and tonight, the votes will be pouring into our newsroom. The candidates have been established. Here's what you need to know as we await the results of 2024 CFP rankings. And here we go. The first of 6 college football playoff rankings will be released tonight. The top 5 conference champions will earn automatic bids, with the 4 highest-ranked teams receiving a first-round bye. Seeds 5 through 12 will play first-round games, with the higher-ranked team hosting that game. Some home playoff games. If the group of 5 champion is not among the top 12 teams in the final poll, it will earn the number 12 spot. And once the final bracket has been revealed, there will be no reseeding of the bracket. First-round games in the college football playoff will take place on Friday, December 20th and Saturday, December 21st. The 4 quarterfinal games will be played on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, be played at the Fiesta Bowl in Glendale, Arizona, the Peach Bowl in Atlanta, the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, and the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans. The semifinals will take place on Thursday, January 9th at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, and then Friday, January 10th at AT&T Stadium in Arlington. The national championship game will take place Monday, January 20th at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. And here's a look at the bracket based on the current AP poll. As you see, the top 4 seeds, Oregon, Georgia, Miami, and BYU. And you take a look here at the rest of the bracket. It is Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Indiana, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Alabama, and Boise State would be our bracket. 11 games in all. Our first college football playoff rankings will be released in just a matter of moments. And let's welcome in our crew. CBS Sports college football writer Richard Johnson here in studio, host of the Cover 3 podcast Chip Patterson, and 24/7 Sports college football writer and analyst Brad Crawford. Richard, this is an exciting night for college football. What do you anticipate that we'll learn tonight?
I think we'll learn finally, after a long time coming, what this committee, how they will change the way that they will rank. I think in a 4-team world, you sort of got into norms, you got into patterns. I think you sort of were able to predict what they would do until they did, frankly, the unpredictable last year, leaving Florida State out of the 4-team field. But I'm excited in how they seed 1 through 12 here when we get to that. When they release 1 through 25, I'm excited to see what they do with some of the non-power teams that are certainly in the mix here for the 12-team dance when we get to a seeding discussion.
Yeah, it's important to note here that every selection committee has a couple members cycle off and a couple members cycle on. The mentality, the approach is going to change. You know, what happens in that room where they fill out a ballot and then they come up with groups and they have to debate in groups. When you realize how tedious the whole process is, you realize how you can get some results that frankly leave a lot of us scratching our heads, because rarely when they're going through the rankings process are they looking at this thing 1 through 25. And so the individual opinions, the individual experiences of the new members that are on and the old members that are off are going to reveal the biases of the 2024 committee. There have been some years where a team that has really good profiles statistically have been favored. There have been some years where it's all about your wins. Some years it's more about how few losses you have. We get our first glimpse at the 2024 committee and what exactly they favor with this first set of rankings.
I want to see if strength of schedule is the top bargaining piece here with the committee, because are we going to see Indiana or Miami as that highest rated unbeaten behind, assumably, top seed Oregon? And I want to see also which one-loss team has the best loss in the eyes of the committee. You know, is it going to be Georgia's loss at Alabama, where the Bulldogs had a sizable halftime deficit, came back, made that a one-score game there at the end? Is it going to be Texas losing at home to Georgia? Or is it going to be Ohio State simply running out of time at Oregon earlier this season against now the #1 team in the country? So strength of schedule and which one-loss team is best is what I want to see.
Yeah, we're going to dive into that a little bit more here in a moment. Chip, what's one question you want answered tonight from the committee?
One, Hakeem, I got 3, baby. Let's go. Okay, burning questions for rankings release #1. First, are they going to respect Indiana and BYU's undefeated records? Because when I fill out my rankings for the CBS Sports 134, I do respect it. That's why Indiana in the CBS 134 was up at #5 this week. #2, where does Penn State get ranked? And a lot of that has to do with an Indiana and with a BYU, because Penn State is going to be favored the rest of the way, but not every game is a home run, slam dunk, surefire win. Can Penn State afford another loss? Will 10-2 be good enough to make the playoff as an at-large? Tonight is going to be our first look at that. And finally, what do you do with Alabama? Because in the past, committees have been all about more, what does your best win look like? How many wins do you have against other teams that we really like and rank highly? Or are they going to be ranked more closer to their losses, which, of course, as a 2-loss team would set them back behind some other 1-loss teams? So I think that Alabama, and let's go ahead and note it, number 11 in the AP poll, number 11 in the coaches poll, if they are even a 1 spot, 2 spot, 3 spots higher, I think that shows us that the committee likes that Georgia win a lot, and that really helps the Crimson Tide with their pursuit of an at-large bid.
I want to know what this committee is going to do with Boise State. Boise State is a top 12 team, fringe top 10 team. If you're just ranking the teams, I think they have probably the best loss in the country to Oregon on the road by 1 possession. They've got wins over UNLV, and they also have wins over Washington State, which, by the way, Washington State's going to be ranked in this college football playoff top 25, at least if I was on the committee doing the rankings. So what do you do with Boise State? We have seen the committee in the past really not give a rip about group of 5 teams, but I think this Boise team is different. What they have with Ashton Jeanty toting the rock has gotten them into shape where I think they're a top 10 team no matter what conference they're playing in.
Yeah, what about the logjam of SEC teams with 2 losses not named Alabama? We think Alabama is going to be the highest ranked 2-loss SEC team, but what about Ole Miss? What about LSU? What about A&M, which was the SEC's lone remaining conference unbeaten against league competition prior to last weekend, losing really bad, 24 points to South Carolina. You see there the SEC standings wide open with 4 weeks in the regular season left. So assuming Georgia is the top-seeded SEC 1-loss team, and Tennessee somewhere behind them maybe, I want to see where, LSU is with 2 losses, Ole Miss with 2 losses, and Alabama.
All right. We are getting down to the nitty-gritty here. The release of the college football playoff rankings are in progress right now. Brad, Chip, and Richard here on CBS Sports HQ. We're going to dive deeper into this as the night goes on. The college football playoff rankings, the first of the year. The standings, too close to call. So what does that mean for the Big Ten and the SEC? We'll examine that as the bracket is revealed on this night. Keep it locked. You're watching CBS Sports HQ.
Let's go.
Ashley, did you know We Need to Talk is going into its 10th season, and we are bringing a digital show every single week.
So we're going to highlight women in sports, whether you're playing, whether you're commentating, whether you're working behind the scenes. I'm looking forward to us having the platform to lead the charge in that.
I'm so excited to talk with you every single week on We Need to Talk now.
Because everyone's in for a treat. It's going to be fun.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you.
Big news coming out of the NFL. A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With highlights.
What a finish at the final round of play.
And in-depth analysis.
Can they three-peat? Tony Romo joins the conversation.
What can you say about this game?
When you need your sports in a snap,
we're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
Find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
Back here on CBS Sports HQ, the rankings are being released as we speak. Here, the look at the 20 through 25 team. Colorado, Washington State, Louisville, Clemson, Missouri's in the top 25 for some reason. And Army remaining undefeated, the 25th ranked team according to the College Football Playoff Committee. Ohio State will be in the expanded field, just a matter of where. The Buckeyes are coming off a win against previously undefeated Penn State. Ohio State's only loss of the season came against top-ranked Oregon in mid-October. Buckeyes' final two games are their biggest two of the regular season against Indiana and rival Michigan. Both games are in Columbus. Now, here's a look at the current Big Ten standings. Indiana and Oregon atop the standings, both undefeated. If the Hoosiers beat the Buckeyes, something that hasn't happened since 1988, then Ohio State would likely be out of contention with 2 losses. Still a path for Penn State to make the playoff with only 1 loss. All right, back here with Richard Johnson, Brad Crawford. Richard, you look at this Big Ten Conference. What's the outlook ahead of the first playoff ranking?
For me, it's all about where is Indiana going to end up in these rankings. Look, if the Indiana Hoosiers had a winged helmet, perhaps a blank scarlet helmet, or perhaps a blank white helmet, the Indiana Hoosiers would be top 5. The Indiana Hoosiers have done one of 2 things that good teams do. They have buried bad teams, all right? They've only played and beaten 2 teams with winning records. I understand that. But you can only play the schedule that is in front of you. That strength of schedule today, as you can see, 80th, not that great. But they have controlled every single game they have been in. They did not trail a second until last weekend. So keep that in mind. They've done the first thing good teams do. The second thing that good teams do, they beat other good teams. Indiana will get the chance to do that against Ohio State in a few weeks.
And staying in the Big Ten, Richard, Penn State with 1 loss, that only loss to Ohio State by a touchdown at home over the weekend. Where are the Nittany Lions going to be? Are they going to be in the 9-10 range, closer to the top 5? Is an 11-1 finish for Penn State going to essentially clinch and lock in a playoff berth? That's kind of the question I'm asking in the Big Ten picture in these first playoff rankings. We know Indiana's unbeaten, but they've played a comparable schedule to Indiana. Penn State would have the same 9-0 record right now had they not played Ohio State, and Indiana plays Michigan this week and Ohio State next week. So we're going to see the real Hoosiers here over the next 2 weekends.
In the SEC, Texas A&M lost its first conference game of the season when the Aggies got upset on the road against South Carolina. Texas A&M also lost star running back Le'Veon Moss for the season because of a knee injury. Who wants to win the SEC? Every school now has 1 conference loss. Texas A&M, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, and LSU are atop the standings with 1 SEC loss. Brad, how many SEC teams do you think will be in the initial CFP rankings?
Yeah, I think there's going to be 4 inside that top 12. And I think you're going to see inside the top 4, probably going to see Georgia at number 2. That's where I had them in my projection. Texas is going to be in that 5 or 6 range. You've got Alabama, LSU, A&M, Ole Miss. So there's several SEC teams capable of making this big-time playoff. But the thing is, how many unbeaten teams are going to, or 1-loss teams are going to knock some of those 2-loss SEC teams out of it?
Yeah, I think when you talk about the dregs of the SEC, I think you got to look farther down the poll. That Missouri team that is somehow ranked after getting spanked by Alabama, after getting worked by Texas A&M, yet they still sit in the top 25. You don't have to rank them just because they're in the SEC, but because they are ranked, that's going to factor in to a lot of the playoff resumes of the teams otherwise in the SEC. It's going to factor into the resume for Alabama. It's going to factor into the resume for Texas A&M. That Missouri win counts for now as a ranked win, and that is something the committee holds up very highly in the resume when it stacks otherwise comparable teams.
All right, the teams are slowly coming in right now. We are watching this live alongside you. Perhaps you're watching on 2 screens here. Notre Dame has won 6 in a row since its embarrassing loss to Northern Illinois. The committee is viewing Notre Dame, Richard, as a team that has made up for its mistake. They're in the field right now. They have them ranked 10th in the playoff field, atop the top 12.
Look, I think that's more or less fine. Notre Dame has the worst loss out of any of these teams by far to a Northern Illinois team that isn't very good, but they have a good win in Texas A&M earlier in the season, so you have to keep that in mind. So I'm more or less fine with where Notre Dame is. They can quibble with where they're at, but I think anywhere from 9 to 12 I think is fine with Notre Dame.
And the good news for Notre Dame is Army, unbeaten Army, made the top 25 at number 25. So Notre Dame's going to get a chance here in a couple weeks to beat another team the playoff committee thinks is decent. And if Army wins that game, now you're looking at a possible G5 contender with one loss Boise State. So I was kind of wondering where Army would be in this top 25, and now you see Notre Dame make the top 10 there. Very important game here in a couple weeks.
A group of 5 team will be in the expanded playoff. Boise State, currently the highest ranked group of 5 team. Then it's undefeated Army. We saw them at 25, who has an upcoming game against Notre Dame. Richard, when you look at the group of 5 team, this is really Boise State. This is their destiny. They control it.
Yeah, it's Boise State's spot to lose in the dance. Obviously, you know, Tulane's not ranked. Louisiana's not ranked. Some of those other fringe group of 5 teams who could win group of 5 leagues, they're not ranked either. We understand that. But again, I think Boise is a top 10 team, full stop. It doesn't matter that they play in the Mountain West. That is a good football team. And, you know, I'm really excited for them, hopefully, to get in the dance here and prove their mettle on the field. I don't know if they'll make a run to the national championship game, but God, especially if you're a Boise program that for so long has wanted to be able to prove it on the field, this is your chance as a program. I mean, how many great players have come through this program? Chris Peterson, a great coach, comes through this program over the last 20-odd years that Boise has been a power, and they have not been able to compete realistically for a national championship. You know, I'd love to see it for real on the field this fall.
Well, I agree, Richard, that Boise State is the overwhelming G5 front runner. Probably going to win the Mountain West. Probably going to finish 12-1. Has that quality loss, as you mentioned, at Oregon. If Army's 13-0, beats Notre Dame, wins the AAC, where do you put Army? Are they a bid stealer? A second G5 team makes this top 12? Looking at maybe a 2-loss Alabama team that doesn't get to Atlanta. Do you put 13-0 Army over Alabama? Or does brand recognition and the name Crimson Tide trump that? So Jeff Monken and the Black Knights are going to have quite an argument here in a few weeks if they finish unbeaten as a conference champion going up against 12-1 Boise State.
Brad, I'm going to get a little conspiracy theory on you here. Let me tell you something. How about, let me give you this. What if this BYU team goes into Salt Lake City next week, loses the Holy War to Utah, and let's say they take another loss somewhere down the road, and you've got a Big 12 champion that's got 2 losses. Who's to say in that reality the 4th and the 5th conference champions aren't the Mountain West champion at Boise State and the 13-0 AAC champion Army Black Knights? I mean, it could happen.
Wow. That would be a
Nobody's a believer in BYU. I don't understand it. The committee has BYU number 9 tonight, despite having a great resume. Gave SMU its only loss of the season way back in early September. They won by 31 at Kansas State. Had the Wildcats not lost last week, I think BYU would have been ranked higher tonight. But guys, I'm surprised that BYU is 9th. I thought they'd be closer to top 5 based on that non-conference win against SMU.
I don't know about that. You know, they're an underdog against UCF, which obviously they put to bed. But that Utah game is going to loom very large. And then don't sleep on that Houston team Thanksgiving weekend. That Houston team can get you. Willie Fritz is going to have that team playing better in November than they were in September. Now they got the quarterback situation figured out.
All right. Brad, Richard, much more ahead. It's what we've been building towards. The first set of college football playoff rankings have been revealed. We've got reaction next on CBS Sports HQ. Keep it locked. This is where all the fun is about to be had here. The debates, who's getting in, who's out. Next on CBS Sports HQ.
said out loud. Voices saying, maybe next time, and not right now. Another setback, timeout, false start. Doubt pushing you to shift, shrink, fold, hide. All while knowing inside you, there's more. The momentum in you is you. Hits you, builds you. The field is just a field until we step on it. Under these lights, walk-ons are welcome. Between unexpected and undeniable. Beyond the almost and the could-have-beens. Our tribe, our people. Here is a home with no penalty for being you. Do you feel it? The landscape has changed. Now watch the world. This is for the love of the game. For everyone. For you.
The first college football playoff rankings are in, and here's how they look. At number 1, no surprise, undefeated Oregon, followed by Ohio State, Georgia, Miami, Texas, Penn State, Tennessee, Indiana, BYU, Notre Dame, Alabama, and Boise State. Now, the rankings are going to look different than the projected bracket because, again, the top 5 conference champions earn automatic bids with the 4 highest-ranked teams receiving a first-round bye. So you see Ohio State and Oregon in the top 2 spots in terms of rankings, but they play in the Big Ten together. We're just spelling it out for you. So that wouldn't work in terms of being a conference champ as you follow suit here. For example, Texas is 5 in the bracket. They are 6th because of the delineation between the SEC as well. So this is what is important. This is the bracket that you will look at. This is the bracket you will fill out, a la the big dance. It's a little bit smaller of a dance, but it is a big dance for college football. As you see, Boise State would travel to Columbus to take on the Buckeyes. Ashton Genty and Quinshon Judkins going head-to-head. Sign me up. Indiana and Tennessee clashing. That would be a heck of a game in Knoxville. Alabama and Texas, we've seen them tangle a time or two before. And Notre Dame and Penn State in Happy Valley. That game would need to be at night, please, because daytime, that is criminal. Please put that at night committee. And then you see the winner moves on. BYU would host a quarterfinal game. Oregon would host the winner of Indiana, Tennessee. That, of course, would be at a neutral site as we've ran down the quarterfinal sites. Miami would play the winner of Alabama, Texas, and Georgia would take on the winner of Notre Dame, Penn State. 11 games in all, and this is our first bracket, and it is a thing of beauty. I'm excited. I can't wait to fill this out. This is going to be fun. I know it's not going to take a long time to fill it out, but you got to look at it. You got to go through. You're like, who's going to be here? Where are they going to be there? Our guys are here. Richard Johnson, Brad Crawford. Richard, I'll go your way first. What jumps out to you first here when you look at the bracket?
That Penn State-Notre Dame game. That Penn State-Notre Dame game is 2 teams that are destined to lose a first-round college football playoff game with how they've played the last few years. They are thankful that the field is 12 teams so that they can actually get in. Lord knows that Penn State team is thankful that it is a 12-team field so that they can make it in the dance. But that matchup is so key for me. That is going to define the tenures of a James Franklin and a Marcus Freeman if it happens. I know we got a lot of football left, but if it were to happen that way, I'm fascinated with the narratives coming out of that game.
Yeah, these are the same 12 teams, actually, that we had in our final CBS Sports playoff projection Monday morning. 4 from the SEC, 4 from the Big Ten. You've got 1 Big 12 representative in BYU. You've got 1 from the ACC, Miami. There's no SMU there. And then you've got Notre Dame and the G5 winner, Boise State. That Boise State at Ohio State first-round game, man, sign me up. Possible Heisman winner, Ashton Genty going up against one of the best, most talented defenses in college football. You know Jim Knowles, man, the Buckeyes defensive coordinator, does not want to face Ashton Genty in the first round. The 5 seed's the one you want to get, but I don't know if you want to get that playing Boise State in the first round.
Man, what if Boise State shocks the world in that opener? What if they beat Ohio State somehow, some way? Then you got to think, I mean, that road's pretty clear. You'd think they could get past BYU, and then those Broncos sitting in a semifinal 120 minutes away from a national championship with a potential rematch against an Oregon team that it came down to the wire against in Autzen in September? Who knows, man? Who knows with that Boise team?
Well, also, Brad, to that point, if you're thinking Ohio State is going to be there, we're not really sure who's going to be playing in that Big Ten title game, but you'd have to think it's Ohio State and Oregon ×2. So perhaps Oregon they're going to be rested waiting for whoever comes out of Indiana and Tennessee, but Ohio State could be gassed when you think about playing the Big Ten title game and then a first-round matchup against Boise State, who's looking for an upset. I mean, that's what we have to start thinking about now in this new era of college football, because we weren't talking about stuff like that. This happens in college basketball in the big dance, where a 1 seed, yeah, they'll get through the first round, but then they get in second or third round, it's like it's anybody's game at this point.
And there's also a chance that we see Ohio State, Oregon 3 times this season. We saw it back at Allison Stadium, 1-point loss for Ohio State. We might see it in Indianapolis here in a couple of weeks in the Big Ten championship game, and then maybe a semifinal scenario with the winner going to the finale. Man, that would be crazy, because these are two of the most talented, best teams on paper in college football. But yeah, Boise State, as Richard said, if they get past that 5 seed in the first round, and then they're probably a betting favorite against BYU, that'd be very interesting. That's why we have these Cinderella conversations.
You know, and there are also potential weather implications. I know the bracket doesn't shake out like this, but what if we get into a permutation where Texas has got to go to Penn State? I mean, you think Texas wants to go up to Happy Valley in the cold and the frigid? I mean, I don't even know if Beaver Stadium's winterized for what December can bring in the middle of Pennsylvania. So keep in mind, weather is going to play into some of these games. I mean, you wonder if you're Ohio State, why don't you just call up Lucas Oil and say, hey, we got a bunch of horses from Florida that want to run on field turf. We'll come back a second weekend. We'll play another neutral site. That is an option, by the way, in the 12-team playoff. The higher-seeded home team can opt, if things work out, to go to a neutral site. That is on the table.
That is accurate. Yeah, that's a good point that you brought up. So if Ohio State doesn't want to play at Ohio Stadium, they can go play maybe indoors somewhere. I would have to think they'd want that game on campus, these teams, especially Penn State, as you mentioned, in mid-December, right before Christmas. Brad, when you look at Penn State, the fans are calling to fire James Franklin. He has one of the biggest buyouts in college football right now, $56 million, if they were to fire him without cause after this season. If they can get into the playoff, because they've never been in the playoff, this is something that they've been working towards. What is the path for Penn State to be there when all is said and done?
Yeah, the path for Penn State is to win out and look good doing it. I do think the Big Ten gets 4 teams in. I think if we get to a scenario in which Indiana and Penn State are both 11-1, and Indiana has maybe a 3-touchdown loss to Ohio State, no disrespect to the Hoosiers, who knows who wins that game. But then you kind of compare, outcomes against favorable opponents as the committee does, then you're taking Penn State 11-1 over Indiana 11-1. But as long as Penn State wins out, I think they're in good position here. The committee showed us tonight at number 6, and Nittany Lions are. They respect Penn State right now, despite James Franklin losing yet another big spot.
Yeah, that Penn State team, golly.
So hold on, is Penn State, if Indiana beats Ohio State, and they're both one-loss teams, who's going to play for the Big Ten title game against Oregon if Oregon wins out?
I do not know the myriad Big Ten tiebreakers, I will admit, and they are myriad for these scenarios. I think one of the most interesting subplots, not just with the Big Ten race, but also the ACC race and the SEC race, is what happens when you have these undefeated teams in these major mega conferences that haven't played each other. We were talking about this last week before SMU and Pitt played. And before Clemson lost. Like, we have all these teams that sometimes they don't play each other in the conference race. And so what happens? I mean, you got to get to, the record against common opponents and all these kinds of things. I mean, eventually they just flip a coin, Hakeem.
Yeah, that's going to be Brad. I mean, that's going to be, you want to talk about some controversy? common opponents, and we're talking about tiebreakers there. Like this could be absolute chaos. You want to talk about chaos in the Big 12? This could be chaos here in the Big 10.
Well, the good news for Indiana fans is Kirk Cinetti has run up the score on several teams that maybe have been common opponents for the Ohio States or the Penn States. I do think if Indiana beat Ohio State, that's going to be a 12-0 team going to Indy. I mean, it's just, that's the toughest team left on the schedule. And if they knock out Ohio State, then you have Ohio State at 10-2 overall, getting possible 10 or 11 seed. That's a dangerous 10 or 11 seed based on that $20 million payroll, as Ryan Day said, through NIL. So if I'm Indiana, this week's game's the biggest of the season.
Yep.
You got to beat Michigan first for that Ohio State game to matter.
So Indiana beats Ohio State at the end of the month, November 23rd. Indiana's in, and Penn State might be out. And then we're talking about like SMU or Texas A&M sneaking up, because right now they're ranked 13th and 14th on the outside looking in. Like the door is open for one of those two teams as well if Penn State, or if Indiana is able to beat Ohio State. Because a two-loss Ohio State team, the committee's going to say, you're done.
Yeah, I look at Texas A&M and I look at Missouri. I look at Missouri at the bottom of this top 25, and I say that Missouri team is given a lot more help than people realize to a team like Texas A&M, to a team like Alabama. Keep that in mind. Now, obviously, also SMU's doing a lot of help for BYU, so it helps them with that case too. So you have a lot of those permutations, at least with this top 25, the way we see it on the first Tuesday night rankings.
Brad, is there a possibility that we would see a two-loss Ohio State team in the playoff? Because that's what we talked about. We were like, well, the 12-team playoff, maybe we'll see a two-loss team in a playoff situation. Could they be the one with two losses?
It's certainly possible. And as you can see tonight, Ohio State #2, they respect that 1-point loss at Oregon. The Buckeyes simply ran out of time in that game. They weren't necessarily outplayed on the road against Oregon. Had that game been in Columbus, maybe Ohio State wins. If they meet again in Indy, maybe Ohio State wins. But to me, if Ohio State finishes 10-2, they're going to want two things to happen. Miami to win out and be the ACC's lone unbeaten conference champion. And then you want the same thing to happen in the Big 12. If Iowa State wins and BYU's maybe 12-1, that makes things dicey for Ohio State. Same if SMU goes to Charlotte and beats Miami and wins the ACC. What does the committee do with a 12-1 Miami team?
I think, I also think, I look at Indiana and Indiana having a chance. It's all to play for Indiana, right? And a team like Indiana in the past, you'd say, oh, well, they'll find the banana skin and they'll slip on it. That Michigan game this weekend, Brad, you just said it. I mean, you have to take care of business in that game. Again, Indiana's done what good teams do, part one. They've buried bad teams. But this Michigan team is the most talented team they have faced. It's not nothing to say that Michigan's athletes, especially in the trenches, are going to pose a significant challenge to Indiana, even though Indiana is a 2-touchdown favorite because Vegas has finally caught up to them, Hakeem.
This is the stuff that we love, because it's all these what-if scenarios, because you can argue right now, look, Indiana has Michigan and Ohio State in back-to-back weeks. There's a bye in there, but those two games right there, that's the season. And fortunately for Indiana, they get that game this week against Michigan on CBS 3:30 Eastern time. Notre Dame is also an interesting team because since losing to Northern Illinois, they've ripped off 6 straight wins. I'm confused in terms of what because they don't have any more room for error, and they have to beat Army coming up here.
Yeah, but remember, Notre Dame's beaten A&M, Louisville, and Navy. I mean, it's like Notre Dame has taken care of business in the last few weeks, and they've looked pretty darn good doing it. I mean, they erased Navy in that game at MetLife Stadium, and, they absolutely smoked Purdue. So I like Notre Dame's case. One team that we haven't really talked about on this bracket, guys, Alabama. Alabama's a benefit of the doubt number 11, by the way. What the heck has Alabama done in the last few weeks to make them look significantly better than an SMU or a Texas A&M? Obviously, they play LSU this week, so we're going to figure out about the Tide. But once halftime was over against Georgia, this Alabama team came back down to earth. Water found its level, and they have not looked to me like a top 12 team in the last 3.5 games. Yes, they dispatched Missouri before their bye week, but I don't think that Missouri team's all that good.
Well, you know why Alabama's there. Brand recognition, and they had that big win against Georgia in the game of the year. So that's why Alabama's there. Now, Alabama goes to LSU this weekend, and that's basically a elimination game for both teams. So if Alabama can take care of business here, we could see them as a 2-loss team in the playoff as well. There's so many what-if scenarios, so many what could happen. What will it be when it all is said and done? Coming up, we break down the winners and losers of the college football playoff rankings next on CBS Sports HQ.
There are some things in life that you can't quite explain.
An extraordinary story.
Maybe it sounds flawless, looks effortless, or makes you feel like a part of history.
The first ever goal for BFC.
And when all of those phenomenons come together, it's perfect. Pitch perfect.
3, 2, 1, let's go.
Ashley, did you know We Need to Talk is going into its 10th season, and we are bringing a digital show every single week.
So we're going to highlight women in sports, whether you're playing, whether you're commentating, whether you're working behind the scenes. I'm looking forward to us having the platform to lead the charge in that.
I'm so excited to talk with you every single week on We Need to Talk now.
Because everyone's in for a treat. It's going to be fun.
When you need your sports news all the time,
We've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you.
Big news coming out of the NFL. A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With highlights
What a finish at the final round of play.
and in-depth analysis.
Can they three-peat? Tony Romo joins the conversation.
What can you say about this game?
When you need your sports in a snap,
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
The world of sports never sleeps, and neither do we.
Welcome to CBS Sports HQ Morning Buzz, Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time.
You can catch up on the latest storylines and highlights with expert analysis to get you dialed in.
So grab your coffee and kickstart your day off right.
With Morning Buzz only on CBS Sports HQ.
They're in the first college football playoff rankings. Here's a look at the top 12. Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, Miami, Texas, Penn State, Tennessee, Indiana, BYU, Notre Dame, Alabama, and Boise State. Keep in mind, the rankings will look different than the projected bracket because the top 5 conference champions will earn automatic bids, with the 4 highest ranked teams receiving a first-round bye. The 12-5 game featuring Boise State and Ohio State, that would be played in Columbus. Indiana clashing with Tennessee in Knoxville. Alabama and Texas in Austin. Notre Dame and Penn State in Happy Valley at night, please. We're requesting that if that game happens. And if it happens, it would be awesome as you see the top 4 teams there in the bracket as Oregon, Georgia, Miami, and BYU. The first round of these college football playoff games will take place on the weekend of December 20th. All right, back here with Richard Johnson, Brad Crawford. We're talking winners and losers here, and all of us are winners. There's really no loser here except some of the teams on the outside looking in. Richard, I'll start with you. Your biggest winner from the first college football playoff rankings in 2024 are who?
My winner's Alabama.
Okay.
I mean, you got an Alabama team that has a loss against Vanderbilt. You got an Alabama team that almost lost to South Carolina, who was a little bit better than I thought a few weeks ago, but they still almost lost that game. And then you got an Alabama that lost to Tennessee. They're getting away with it here. They're getting away with it because of their first half against Georgia. Not their second half, but they did enough in the first half to win that game. So, you know, if I was seeding the bracket personally, I wouldn't have them in there, to be honest with you. I think they snuck into this field at number 11. Obviously, they've got a de facto eliminator with LSU this weekend, so we're really going to find out what Alabama did on the bye week to be ready to go. But big winner for me is Alabama, who's going to get away with it as long as they can get through LSU this weekend.
Yeah, my big winner is Tennessee tonight. Number 7 in the poll at 7-1. The only quality win was by a touchdown at home, by the way, against Alabama a couple weeks ago. We thought early in the season those wins against NC State and Charlotte and then on the road against Oklahoma were going to be marquee primetime wins for the Vols. NC State's not ranked. Oklahoma's in a tailspin right now. I think Indiana, Notre Dame, both those schools should have been ranked ahead of Tennessee in tonight's rankings. But here we are, SEC bias at its finest. Tennessee 7-1, number 7 in the committee's first poll.
4 SEC teams, 4 Big Ten teams. No really surprise there. Those are super conferences in college football. Your biggest loser is who from the first set of the college football playoff rankings?
BYU. I mean, tough sitting there at 9th. You know, I think they're frankly right around where they should be, but it does add to the pile of they don't believe in us that BYU has had this season. Again, underdogs against a UCF team that they ended up spanking in that game. So, yes, they get to play the nobody believes in us card, do the Cougars.
Yeah, BYU, I'm in full agreement with Richard there. You schedule non-conference games in the playoff era, good non-conference games, to look good, build that strength of schedule. And what does BYU do? They go to SMU and win. SMU has a chance to win the ACC this year, but the committee's not respecting that win. Beat Kansas State, a 7-2 team, by 31 points on the road. Have not lost this season. We're supposed to love these unbeaten power conference teams in the first rankings, but BYU, no respect tonight.
Richard, I want to ask you one question here before we get to this projected bracket, because I think some fans are going to be curious as why Ohio State was ranked above Georgia in the rankings. Not the bracket, the rankings. Ohio State 2 and Georgia being 3. What would your answer be? I think
Ohio State's loss over Oregon, or loss to Oregon, I should say. Ohio State's loss to Oregon, 1 point, close shave, is a lot better than Georgia's loss to Alabama, where even though they battled back, they were way down in that game. And so that is, I think, what separates the two of those teams, and the fact that obviously Ohio State has a win over Penn State.
Brad, you agree with that?
I'm in full agreement there, too. I mean, Ohio State, I think, right now is clear-cut second-best team in the country. Georgia has a quarterback in Carson Beck that's had 2 3-interception games. Game control, usually one of Kirby Smart's strengths, has not been the case this season with the Bulldogs. So I'm okay right now with Ohio State at 2.
Let me show you the bracket here once again, Richard, as well. And you look at the projected bracket that we have. Is there a team on the bracket right now that has an easy path? And I say easy lightly, but a path to get to the Natty.
I'm not going to say Boise's path is easy because they've got Ohio State, but if they can get through that, and it is a monumental if. But remember, it's hard to do transitive, but the team that beat Ohio State, Boise State, took to the brink in their house. So keep that in mind. Boise can hang. They're not just any Mountain West team. If they can get through that game, they've got a BYU team that is ranked 9th but seeded 4th. And so they would go to BYU and then they would play that game. There's a path there for Boise State. Not an easy one, but there is a path there. And I think it's a relatively more easy path than Indiana got to go to Rocky Top and then Oregon to get to a semifinal.
Well, you brought up weather, too, and those boys from Boise State, it's cold in Idaho, and they could deal with the cold in Columbus. So some of the boys from the South playing in the SEC, I don't know how they're going to deal with 25 degrees in Tennessee in December. We'll see if that ends up happening, but it can get pretty frigid down south in December. We'll see what ends up happening. Let's take a look at Brad Crawford's CBSSports.com bracket. He put it together based on his final projection here. And Brad, it's almost identical to what we got. A couple changes here. Take us through your bracket.
Yeah, very close to the committee's rankings. Same 12 teams, maybe not in the exact order, but I've got the 4 projected champions. Miami from the ACC, Oregon overall #1 seed, BYU. I think BYU finishes 13-0 and wins the Big 12 as the Big 12's lone bid. And then Georgia somehow is going to win the SEC. But Indiana, Penn State's a game I'm looking at. Big 10 on Big 10. We've heard the committee say on the record that they are not going to seed these teams to try and avoid conference matches. And that would be a game Indiana, Penn State have not played in the regular season. And they're not going to meet in Indianapolis in a couple weeks either. So Indiana, Penn State's a game that if you're a Big 10 fan, that'd be a great first-round matchup.
All right, Richard, I want you to take a look at that bracket one more time that Brad revealed. What stands out to you? What's your reaction to that bracket that he put together?
Well, the first thing I love in there, the matchup of Boise State, Texas. Give me that. I like it. I mean, I would love to see that game. And then Alabama, Ohio State.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember the Zeke Elliott, the run through the heart of the South down there in New Orleans, playing Alabama and Ohio State, seeing those two teams on the field in Columbus, that would be incredible. And then, frankly, because we're not really going to see Indiana against much of the Big Ten's upper crust besides Ohio State, seeing them potentially against Penn State in a first-round playoff game, that'd be pretty cool, too.
Yep, it would be. This is pretty good stuff. Again, this is just the first set of rankings. There's 6 of these are Selection Sunday, just like we have in college basketball. And, boy, it is going to continue to get exciting as we get closer and closer to the end of the regular season and then to the playoffs. Richard and Brad here on CBS Sports HQ. Hey, just like college basketball, we're on Bubble Watch in college football. And we're going to talk about the games this weekend that have major playoff implications next on CBS Sports HQ.
heart said out loud, voices saying, maybe next time, and not right now. Another setback, timeout, false start, doubt pushing you to shift, shrink, fold, hide, all while knowing inside you, there's more. The momentum in you is you, hits you, builds you. The field is just a field until we step on it. Under these lights, walk-ons are welcome. Between unexpected and undeniable, beyond the almost and the could-have-beens, our tribe, our people. Here is a home with no penalty for being you. Do you feel it? The landscape has changed. Now watch the world. This is for the love of the game. For everyone. For you.
Just like college basketball, we're on bubble watch in college football. And here's a look at the bubble games in Week 11. A bevy of them, including Georgia at Ole Miss and 6-2 Alabama visiting 6-2 LSU at night. Back here with Richard Johnson, Brad Crawford. The Tide and Tigers clashing in a virtual elimination game. Alabama's won 11 of the last 13 meetings, while LSU has won 14 straight home games. Former head coach Les Miles is famous for saying, Death Valley is where opponents' dreams come to die. Richard, does Alabama's playoff dreams die on Saturday night in Baton Rouge?
I think they do.
Ooh.
I don't think this Alabama team is cut out to win this game. I think what they've shown in the last 3 weeks and half of the Georgia game is that they are not this Death Star Alabama team. Now, I will say this, Hakeem. What Alabama did in that Georgia game was they came out of a bye week with a game plan and they shocked the dogs, and Georgia was slow to adjust to what Alabama threw at them. Alabama really threw the kitchen sink at them, particularly on defense. They executed and they built a massive lead in that game in the first half. Do they have a trick to pull out of their sleeves out of a bye week against LSU this weekend? And how will LSU respond if that happens?
The home team in this matchup has won the last 3 years. A couple years ago, Brian Kelly went for 2, beat Bryce Young at Tiger Stadium. To me, this game comes down to who do you trust more at quarterback? Is Garrett Nussmeier going to throw 3 picks at home like he did in College Station a few weeks ago? That's not going to happen. Jalen Milroe, both his losses this season have come on the road in Nashville. Though he played okay in that game, did throw a pick 6, and then he played pretty poorly at Tennessee. I'm with Richard here. I think LSU wins at home, and a possible 9-3 finish for Bama. That's a stinky first year for Kalen DeBoer.
That sounds like the wrong team's favored, Brad. Right? I mean, that's what you're telling me.
Man. I'm not betting against LSU at night at home.
Yeah.
Not in a rivalry.
Yeah, no, thank you. No. This is it right here for Alabama. So, and for if LSU's going to have any shot here to try to sneak in. Look, it's an outside shot, but if they can get a win against Alabama, who right now, in the eyes of the committee, is number 11, that would be pretty huge for them. Georgia's only loss, as we mentioned, is to Alabama in the game of the year. Dogs are on the road at Ole Miss, who has 2 losses. Not really sure what this team is. Lost to Kentucky at home, then LSU in overtime. Both head coaches have served on Nick Saban's staff. Lane Kiffin was Alabama's OC. Kirby Smart was Alabama's DC. Jackson Dart coming off a 515-yard passing game. Carson Beck coming off yet another 3-interception game. Brad, who do you like in this game? Because I feel like this is a spot for Ole Miss to say this is who we are. This is what we have been trending towards if you're Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, the bad news for Ole Miss is Georgia has umpteenth 5-stars on defense compared to what Jackson Dart faced last week against Arkansas. 6 touchdown passes, 400 yards. Ole Miss scored at will in every quarter in that game. This is another weird line here in Week 11 in the SEC. Georgia only a 2.5-point road favorite. Normally, Vegas gives you 3 points for playing at home. So this one's pretty much wide open, according to the experts, Georgia and Ole Miss. But you're right, Lane Kiffin, he needs a prove-it game. game. Already lost to Kentucky at home. Had a big lead at LSU, lost that game at night a few weeks ago. Ole Miss this offseason spent a lot of money to win this game Saturday against Georgia. So big game in the SEC. It's one of 2 games, I think, that are going to determine playoff implications for those 4 teams.
Georgia's got a passing game problem. It's pretty clear. And I think that problem stems from the fact that they don't have Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers led the Georgia Bulldogs in targets last year, and he didn't even play in 12 games. You will recall he got hurt in the Vanderbilt game last year. Last year, Georgia and Ole Miss played, and Georgia beat him pretty handily. This, to me, Hakeem, is the classic spot where Ole Miss just end in the weight class, where we realize that Ole Miss can play well and good against 9 or 10 teams on their schedule, but a certain class of SEC opponent they are not cut out to beat. If Ole Miss is able to come out in this game and put up a number, can Carson Beck and the Georgia passing game actually come back? Obviously, they showed it that they can against Alabama, but the way Carson Beck's been playing the last few weeks, I don't know if the Dogs can do that.
Yeah, it's going to be a prove-it game, as Brad said. As I don't know that I trust Carson Beck. I mean, it's back-to-back 3-interception games. Look, if he was playing against the Georgia defense, he might have 6 interceptions in one game. He's not. So I'm curious to see what the score is going to be. Is it going to be high scoring like it was kind of last year where Georgia, I think, hung 50 on him? Or is it going to be played a little bit tighter to the vest between Lane Kiffin and Kirby Smart? We shall see. In the Big 12, it's been chaos. Iowa State, Kansas State both lost in Week 10. BYU, Colorado just sitting pretty, both on a bye. Cougars atop the conference. Iowa State needs a bounce back against Kansas. Jayhawks have won the last 2 meetings. Richard, you know that the Big 12, this is a big spot for them this week. This is a must-win for the Cyclones. There's no ifs and or but. This is a must-win.
Yeah, I think it's a must-win for Iowa State. It's hard to find more than a 3-point spread in any Big 12 game. This conference is so tight. Nobody's been able to separate themselves. But there has been, in my opinion, no team in the Big 12 more disappointing than Kansas. With what they have at quarterback with Jalen Daniels, and he's a great player in the past, but he's had some injury concerns, and he's had some turnover concerns this year. And I think a lot of their offensive woes are because Eno Kadalnicki is at Penn State as the offensive coordinator, and so they've had to figure out some stuff on offense. But do they have it in this game? Can they surprise I think Iowa State's a really good defense, a really good football team. Can they pull a stunner in this game?
Travis Hunter is going to be checking his Apple Watch during the Colorado-Texas Tech game for the score of this Iowa State-Kansas game. Because if Kansas beats Iowa State and Colorado wins Saturday, we're talking about Coach Prime and the Buffaloes potentially making a run to the Big 12 championship game, a couple wins away from making the playoff. This is a must-win game, as you mentioned, Richard, for Iowa State. Had that bad loss a week ago. And Kansas is a team with Jalen Daniels at quarterback. They can beat anybody. Lance Leipold said this week that he feels this team is starting to play a little better at the right time. Could certainly play spoiler this weekend.
I can't imagine being in a world where the Big 12 is not in the college football playoff when it is expanded to 12 teams. Like, BYU's got to run the table here, and they're going to be in. But if they don't, Iowa State, one-loss team, this is supposed to be equal opportunity, It's supposed to be.
One-loss Big 12 champion against 13-0 Army, who's beaten Notre Dame and is a conference champion. And then Boise State,
you're just mixing it
as
up
a
here.
Conference champion. If you're putting 3 teams for that 5th guaranteed berth, I'm taking Boise and I'm taking Army. And a one-loss Big 12 champion in that reality ain't getting in.
Can't wait to see.
The committee always looks at unblemished records. The committee loves an unbeaten record. We've shown that over the
except Florida State.
Well, except Florida State. Yeah.
we got to end on a zinger right there. Brad Crawford, Richard Johnson here on CBS Sports HQ, and here's a look at the rankings. We're going to run through the entire top 25 as of this night. It is Oregon, unanimous at the top, followed by Ohio State, Georgia, Miami, Texas, Penn State, Tennessee, Indiana, BYU, Notre Dame, Alabama, and Boise State. All these teams currently in the bracket. Here's the teams that are knocking on the door. SMU, Texas A&M, the first team out. Second team out, Texas A&M, to put it into college basketball terms. LSU, Ole Miss, Iowa State, Pitt, Kansas State, Colorado, and you see Army there at 25, just saying, oh, okay, we're just going to lay here in the weeds. Don't forget about us. We might be able to run the table and create some absolute chaos when all is said and done.